A tourist shoved an elderly woman, thinking the guardsman would stay silent, but his response shocked everyone. Here's what happened. It was early morning in London. Despite the cool breeze, a crowd of tourists had already gathered near Buckingham Palace. People were animatedly discussing the best angles for their photos, and children laughed, pointing at the motionless guardsman. The tall man in a red uniform and a bearskin hat stood like a statue, utterly still, his attentive gaze hidden from the crowd. Among the tourists, a group of 3 young men in black hoodies stood out. One of them, Jason, clearly saw himself as the leader. Holding his phone at the ready and smirking, he loudly declared, "All right, guys, let's see how much of a pro this guy really is." His friends chuckled, egging him on. Without hesitation, Jason stepped forward and shouted, "Hey, you in the hat, can you even hear us? Or are you a robot?" The guardsman didn't flinch. Not a single muscle on his face betrayed a reaction. The crowd fell silent, and someone started recording the scene. But Jason was only encouraged by the attention. "Okay, let's see how far he'll go." Jason grinned, turning to the audience. "You want a show? You'll get one." The crowd became livelier, some laughing, others visibly displeased. An elderly woman with a cane standing nearby shook her head and muttered, "How can anyone behave like this? It's beyond rude." Jason, of course, ignored her. He stomped loudly on the cobblestones, clearly trying to attract attention. "Come on, buddy, smile, or can't you?" he shouted, laughing. The guardsman remained still. His unwavering stance made Jason's antics seem even more foolish. Feeling emboldened by his moment of fame, Jason continued, "Maybe I should just touch your hat. Would you say thank you then?" The crowd held its breath. Some murmured in disapproval, others captured the moment on their phones. Jason basked in the attention, but the guardsman, steadfast against the provocations, stood firm and unyielding. The crowd at Buckingham Palace grew livelier as Jason and his friends became bolder. It all started small. Zach, one of Jason's group, bent down and flicked a coin toward the guardsman's feet. The coin clinked against the cobblestones, catching the crowd's attention. "Well, buddy, will you at least smile for some change?" Zach sneered, staring defiantly at the unmoving figure. The crowd split in response. Some laughed at the absurdity, while others, including the elderly woman with the cane, were visibly displeased. She stepped forward, shaking her head. "This is unacceptable. Show some respect for tradition," she exclaimed. Her words were drowned out by the laughter of the group. Feeling even more emboldened, Jason pulled a plastic bottle from his pocket with a victorious grin. "All right, if the coin didn't work, let's see if he'll handle this." He swung his arm slowly and tossed the bottle toward the guardsman. The bottle landed nearby, harmless, but enough to stir murmurs in the crowd. Some gasped, while others recorded the scene on their phones. Jason smirked and continued, "Are you even alive, buddy? Or are you just a mannequin? This is so boring." The guardsman remained motionless, his gaze fixed far beyond the crowd and chaos. Yet his silence spoke volumes, a quiet disdain hidden beneath an iron will. "Okay, let's get serious," Jason declared as Zach stepped closer. His hand reached toward the guardsman's hat. "I'll just touch it. It's funny, right?" Zach laughed, anticipating a reaction. But before he could, a sharp voice cut through the commotion. "Stop this at once!" The elderly woman's voice rang out with unexpected strength, causing many in the crowd to turn. "Don't you have any decency?" Jason turned to her with an annoyed expression. "Listen, Grandma, this is none of your business," he snapped, waving his hand dismissively as though shooing her away. The motion made her stumble, and she fell onto the cobblestones, clutching her cane for support. The crowd froze. The chatter was replaced by a tense silence, broken only by murmurs of outrage. "This has gone too far," someone shouted. "Did he seriously push an elderly woman?" another exclaimed. Even those who had laughed earlier now looked away in discomfort. The crowd stirred, as if preparing to intervene. Jason stood frozen, his defiant expression faltering as a flicker of worry crossed his face. The guardsman, who had remained motionless up until now, visibly tensed. This moment would not go unnoticed. All eyes turned to him, waiting for his response. The crowd froze as if time itself had stopped. The elderly woman, lying on the cobblestones, struggled to get up, leaning heavily on her cane. Her hat had tilted to the side, and her face was etched with shock and pain. People around her began murmuring, the growing buzz of outrage filling the air. Phones were raised to record the moment, but no one dared to intervene. And then, something happened that no one expected. The guardsman took a step forward, just one step, but it carried the weight of a thunderous challenge. The crowd fell silent. His firm, commanding voice rang out over the square. "Step away from her! Now!" It was a cinematic moment, as if the entire scene shifted focus to the guardsman, who single-handedly carried the gravity of the situation. The crowd gasped audibly, and Jason, standing a few meters away, flinched, visibly startled. "What?" Jason mumbled, trying to regain his bravado. "What are you gonna do? You can't do anything. You're just a—" But his voice trembled, and his words faltered. The guardsman's cold, unwavering gaze cut through him like the sharp chill of London's winter wind. He stood there, monumental, an embodiment of order that refused to be disrespected. Without saying another word, the guardsman knelt beside the elderly woman. His movements were swift yet respectful. He helped her to her feet, adjusted her cane, and ensured she was steady. The crowd watched in hushed awe, with someone whispering, "Now that's a real man." "Thank you," the woman murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. The guardsman gave her a small nod before straightening up and turning to Jason. His face remained calm, but his eyes burned with steely resolve. "Being a tourist does not give you the right to disrupt order or humiliate others. Shame on you for your behavior." The words weren't loud, but they carried a force that left Jason visibly shaken. His smug grin vanished, replaced by an awkward grimace. The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of approval sweeping through. Someone called out, "Well done! That's how it's done!" "A real hero!" another voice chimed in. Jason looked lost. His friends who had been laughing moments ago were now pale and silent. Slowly, they began backing away, realizing the situation had spun out of their control. A spectator aimed their phone camera directly at Jason, taunting, "You're gonna look like a bully everywhere now. Get out of here before it gets worse." The crowd collectively closed in, not aggressively, but with enough presence to push Jason and his friends off the square. Meanwhile, the guardsman, maintaining his impeccable posture, calmly returned to his post. He adjusted his uniform, his expression as composed as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew, this man wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol of honor, unshaken by provocations or insults. As the applause swelled once more, a voice rose from the crowd. "This is a reminder for all of us. Respect comes first." Jason and his friends practically sprinted away, jeered at by the crowd. Their smug smirks had melted into expressions of fear and embarrassment. Their bravery had dissolved like sugar in hot tea. The crowd that had laughed at their antics moments earlier now openly expressed their disgust. "Shame on them! People like that shouldn't be allowed near the palace." "How can anyone be so rude?" A man holding a camera shouted after them mockingly. "Congratulations! You're internet stars now. Everyone will know what idiots you are." Meanwhile, the guardsman, maintaining his flawless composure, stood by the elderly woman. She had risen with his help and, trembling, adjusted her coat. Her gaze was filled with gratitude. "You're a true hero," she said, looking him in the eyes. "Thank you for protecting me." The guardsman inclined his head slightly, accepting her thanks with quiet dignity. Without another word, he returned to his position, squared his shoulders, adjusted his hat, and resumed his watch as if nothing had happened. But the crowd had seen everything, and it changed them. The video spread online within hours. Headlines read, "Guardsman shows poise against arrogant tourists. Honor and dignity in service of tradition." The comments section exploded. "This is who we should respect, a true role model. Honor, dignity, and courage. There's still hope in this world. The guardsman proves that tradition outweighs arrogance. The tourists are a disgrace." The video racked up millions of views. Jason and his friends became the villains of the story, their faces and actions scrutinized on social media and news outlets. Fame of this kind was clearly not what they had wanted. The next day, an even larger crowd gathered at Buckingham Palace. But this time, the atmosphere was different. People kept a respectful distance, taking photos of the guardsman with quiet reverence. There were no loud jokes or foolish antics. Among the crowd was the elderly woman, standing off to the side, smiling quietly as she watched the guardsman. This time, no one interrupted her moment of respect. Some even turned to her, tipping their hats as a gesture of reverence. The guardsman stood motionless, majestic. His silence spoke louder than any words. This moment became a reminder. Respect for tradition isn't outdated. It's the foundation of a civilized society. The crowd eventually dispersed, but a sense of admiration and pride lingered. And the guardsman, indifferent to the attention, remained at his post, standing watch as a guardian of honor for his country.